Well, good day, everybody. Mynor Ramos here with Asset Legacy Planning, and I have Mike Domico with me. Now, most of you have either seen some of our YouTube videos, some of the webinars that we recorded together about different aspects of the business, especially the insurance industry. Just as a reminder, I'm a mortgage banker, been that for over 20 years. Mike comes to us as a special resume of the insurance industry over 50 years. And so, Mike, if you want to just introduce yourself and say hello to everybody.
Well, Minor, thank you. Again, my name is Mike Domico. I have been in the insurance industry my whole adult life, and been very pleased with the opportunities that it has afforded me. And I'm especially appreciative of the opportunity, Minor, that you've brought and our whole, advanced insurance services series that we've been working on. And I understand that we get to change roles today.
That's
I
right.
get I get to be the boss for a change, huh?
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm extremely pleased and even flattered that one of Minor's favorite subjects and one that he's put many hours of work into is the Legend of Legacies program, and he's entrusted me the ability to question him on it, so that we get better understanding. I can tell you from a practitioner, what Mynor has done is absolutely groundbreaking. Um, many times, many times with clients, we spend hours going over, what do you need to do when you go see the attorney? Because just walking into the attorney and saying I need a will, it just opens up, a Pandora's box of problems. However, what Mynor has done is he's codified the documents that you need so that you can go over, you can review, and you can actually make, changes that fit your need before you ever hand it over to the attorney so the attorney can sign. And as much as Mynor and I have discussed, that signature is so important, it's just as important that you have the ability to have the documents the way you want them before the attorney does his part. So Mynor, again, thank you for this opportunity. And why don't we get right into it?
Yeah, let's get right to it. And I want to open up by just saying this, this in its highest level is about protecting your home, protecting your health, protecting your business, and most importantly, protecting the desires and the wishes that you have for your family. Now, that alone right there should prompt people to say, well, how, right? That's kind of the initial conversation they'll have. And if we're all honest with each other, does anybody really want to have this conversation? Does anybody really want to be in a hospital room and have the doctor dictate to you that you have to sign this DNR code for your relative, for your loved one, or even for yourself, right? So the idea is that we need to be prepared before tragedy strikes. So in this arena, what I like to do is I like to tell people, we need to break it down to three simple basic steps. So Mike, I'll give you an example. When clients come to us and they maybe just got their insurance policy, they went through a financial plan, there's a conversations between insurance agents, financial advisors, all of that. Then we'd like to go deeper into this because some people are afraid of getting in front of attorneys. Number one, because they're afraid that they're paying $500 or $1,500 an hour just while the attorney drinks their coffee. I kid around. I have a lot of attorney friends, and I kid around with them with that. But the reality is that most people don't want to go into an attorney's office, and they're afraid of what they don't know. So what we've done is we really just simplified it to a simple interview, and in the interview, no two families are alike. So in the interview, it's more of the design. And then once we're able to determine, and we're going to go through the documents as well. But then preparing those documents there that are sent in a nice portfolio to the individuals, to their home, that we're not done yet. After that, we need to sit down and understand how to put a home and list it inside the trust so that it's protected against any creditors, or better yet, to be able to keep everybody's noses out of it, right? So the idea is of privatizing our financial affairs, if that makes sense.
Mynor, I want to just go back a little bit, because I think people need to understand that what you're doing is far more critical than you're giving yourself credit for. Okay, so if someone's ill and someone's on the verge of passing, that's bad enough. At least you may have some time to do some documentation. But let's take the worst case scenario. You get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and someone that's very dear and near to you is laying on a bed in a hospital because they had an accident. And now you go running in there, and your whole concern is, how do I take care of this person? How do I make sure that this person gets through the night? And some nurse is doing their job, and before they can let you agree to whatever procedure they need to do, they start handing you documents.
Right.
You got to sign this. Well, what is it? Well, this is a power of attorney, or this is a living will, or whatever terminology they use. That's the last thing in the world you want or care about. The asset legacy planning not only prevents that from happening, it also nullifies, as you've pointed out, the fear of dealing with the attorney when you do have the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Because the worst thing in the world is the unknown. And
Right.
how do you prepare for it? Okay. So if we can take care of these documents, if we can take care of these questions when everybody's alive and healthy,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it a whole lot easier. And then when you do go to that attorney, and the attorney says, well, what type of power of attorney do you want? Well, first of all, you know that there's more than one, because you already discussed it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the right power of attorney for your situation because you've already examined it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, to be really, really fair to you and your program, this is quintessential to peace of mind. Whether it's the accident or whether it's a lingering illness, whatever the situation, when you lose a loved one, that's not the time to be doing the planning.
Mm-hmm.
Now's the time to be doing it. And legacy planning, asset legacy planning, excuse me, gives you that opportunity. And I think that's more valuable than most people could imagine.
And to your point, Mike, I think that most of us take for granted something that that is very common to us is procrastination. And I sat down with someone recently, and they couldn't fathom this, and I said, well, let me ask you a question. If you had a little lump here on your neck, and just it wasn't bothering you, like, would you go to the doctor? Probably not. Okay. Maybe the lump gets a little bit bigger and it starts to bother you a little bit. Now you have a bigger incentive to go to the doctor and have it checked out, right? But it took a higher level of severity for that to happen. Now, if the person really wants to get that taken care of and has the doctor examine them, and the doctor all of a sudden says, hey, that's a stage 3, stage 4 cancer. You have 30 days to live, or 6 months. Now, what do you think about that person's urgency? Right?
Right.
That urgency level just goes through the roof. And everybody, comes in as like what I call a rescue mission. But the thing is that most people don't live in that moment until something crazy happens. And that's what you were referring to, that we want to be able to change the landscape and just give people some idea of what they can do, to simplify the process and to take action. Because unfortunately, there are some people that, many people go to hospital stays or even funerals, and none of this stuff is taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And again, when you have that moment, the attention should be on the loved one, not on the documentation.
And when we talk about the loved one, I like to say this a lot. We need to leave a bright light for the family.
Right.
We need to visualize the people that will turn to watch this, because we will do an interview and we'll record it and we'll have it stored for the individuals and their families. So whenever, something does happen and it gets played out with them, there was a movie about a will, about somebody who left a will, and I think it was like the grandfather that left a video series about the things that he wanted his grandson to do before he, gave him his inheritance. I think it was called The Ultimate Gift, if I recall it well. Well, that I don't know when that movie came out, but this idea came to us with my daughter Kayla. I mean, we started working on this project, and a little bit of my story now. In 2020, we started working on putting this together, and we had all these grand ideas. She did the website for me. She did all the logo design. She went through everything, and then unfortunately, our family had to go through this same thing in the hospital. We suffered hospital trauma for 4 months, and and then in December of 2021, God showed us His glory, and she's no longer with us, but it's been a journey for us to have to go through this, and even though we were somewhat prepared, I regret that even she was 25 years old, didn't have this recorded. Like
Right.
if somebody, and I believe that once a person becomes 18 years old, they should start to have this in place, because there's so many things that, so many variables. But the idea is that in the video, the individual is going to go through a series of questions, and the software is going to tell us where to go next. The interview is what becomes part of the legacy plan, and I think that that's the niche that you're referring to. That's what makes us different.
Right. And nobody knows the legacy better than the person who's telling their own story. Because I wasn't as sophisticated as you, Mynor. So my clients, I always recommended writing a letter, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the same concept. It's the idea that if you're the one that created the estate, if you're the one that created the wealth, then you ought to be able to tell your story to the people that are most important to you on how you want it handled, how you want it to benefit them. And whether it's a letter, in my case, because I'm ancient, or it's a video because you're a little more updated, when you go see that attorney, the attorney, I don't care how good they are, only knows what you tell them,
Mm-hmm.
and they know how to put it into legal language, but it's got to be a translation from your language, and
Right.
that's where the legacy follows through. So when you see your attorney and you already have your forms filled out, already have your video and or letter attached, that attorney can then say, okay, fine, this is all we need to do. Blah, 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 sign here. It's now your legacy. And that removes so much angst from the moment that we are all headed to, yet we all fear.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting, Mike, three of my grandparents, I only have pictures of them.
Right.
The only one that we recorded was my 97-year-old grandmother that just passed away in 2022 in December. 97 years old. We had the opportunity, because now we have every single, grandchild and great grandchild, the video. So we had videos and the phone and pictures. I mean, we have tons. And we would ask her, tell us about this, tell us when you were born, tell us when you were a child. All of that stuff has become more real to us. Like when we watch her, when we're playing around and she's on video, it's a different feeling than just looking at those other three grandparents only through pictures. It changes things, because the emotion is different when somebody hears a message from the individual with their own voice, their own emotions, their own mannerisms, it just brings that to life, right? So
To bring a culture that most of us are not familiar with into view, the whole reason for the pyramids and for the temples in ancient Egypt were because immortality to the Egyptians was in the mentioning of the name.
mm-hmm.
So by having, as you pointed out, your grandmother videoed and recorded, she never dies.
Mm-hmm.
Her mortal remains pass, but she's always here. And again, that's one of the gifts that I believe that asset legacy gives to a family. I think it's again monumental that you're able to do that. And again, thank you for all the families that you're going to be helping.
Absolutely. And so these are the documents you were going to talk about. Each one.
Yeah. So the power of attorney. Talk a little bit about that. What are you talking about when you say power of attorney?
Yeah. So when you have anything happening to you where you're hospitalized or something happens, your financial affairs need to have a way to move and to continue. So when you assign a power of attorney to a family member, a sub trustee, somebody that you trust, anybody like that, you're literally giving them the power to act in your behalf. I call it like kind of like an attorney in fact, right? These are, I try not to get too confusing, but when you have that in place, then the things that you would have done financially, if you had the ability, you weren't in a coma or anything like that, somebody else whom you assign the power of attorney is able to do that for you.
Yeah. And is it fair to assume that you have shared with that person, either in video, writing, or in person, when you're able to, what your wishes are, how you do want things to continue?
Right. And that's part of the interview is that we'll make it available depending on what powers are given from the trustee. Because so some of the terms, my trust, I am the trustee. My wife is my secondary trustee, and so forth down the line. Well, that means that because it's an irrevocable living trust, it is operational right now until I become incapacitated, I'm not able to talk, or if something happens to me and I pass away.
Yeah. Okay, when we go to the Advanced Healthcare Directive and what we also refer to as a living will, what's the importance of that? If I'm in an accident, I'm in the hospital, what does that do for my family?
So what it does is, especially there are a lot of insurance agents that talk about the living benefits of a life insurance policy, right? Oh, that's
Right.
great. Okay. Well, does anybody really know how that works? Well, I'll give you an example. Kayla had a couple of policies, and we
Mhm.
thought maybe we could accelerate some of those for some of the expenses. Although we had really, really good health insurance, there were some other aspects financially of her being moved from Orlando over to Philadelphia. Well, here's what happens: her beneficiaries were her parents,
Right.
but who was the insured? She was. The
Right.
living benefit could only be exercised by her or somebody with an advanced health directive. Big,
Okay, so
big.
minor, let's go back over that because that's probably one of the most important segments of the conversation when a person is alive
Mhm.
but unable to respond to, hey, would you like to take an advance on your insurance known as a living benefit, and they can't answer that question. So go over that again because that's very critical.
So there's a lot of considerations, and we like to talk about having a health agent that understands all of this. Now, I had to play that role while Kayla was in the hospital, meaning I actually called the insurance broker from the company that I was working with, and they
Mhm.
eventually got in touch with the CEO of the insurance company and the CEO of the hospital to try to settle things, because some of this stuff wasn't in place. And so it was really about now understanding how the life insurance, when when you talk about living benefits, so it's not what everybody thinks. So if it's a really young person, and just for the sake of numbers, say somebody has $100,000 death benefit.
Right.
Well, if the person's a little older, that death benefit, the settlement on that might be 50 or 60 or 70%. But when a person is that young, I mean, in this case, I think they were only offering about a 22% death to benefit to settlement a ratio. And it makes sense, because to a 25-year-old, that life expectancy is like, you expect that person to live much longer than 25. So we obviously didn't know that. We had to act as our own health agent, and we had to learn at this point how living benefits actually work. And you and I talk about life settlements in other categories. That was really the best example of a life settlement that I ever saw live, like in front of me, because that's really what it was. They were settling on a portion of the death benefit because there was an illness involved.
So the first thing is, what percentage of the death benefit was available, which you found out because she was so young. It was a lower percentage than what you might have expected. But more critical, you also found out that since she was unable to sign the paper at the time, what did that mean as far as the availability?
What wasn't able to execute it? I mean, we would literally have to go through, and go to court.
What would have been different with an advanced healthcare directive?
Right. So in an advanced health directive, you actually already have those conversations with people. So I'll give you an example of somebody that is very close to us, Mike. This person says he's got it down to he doesn't want to spend more than 90 days if he's in some kind of if he's being held alive through life support. He's like, after 90 days you cut it off, but within those 90 days I want there to be everything that could be done, everything possible that could be done for me to save my life. I want that to happen. Now, I think that the reason why he designated that is because he remembers that one case with Terry Schiavo. It was a Florida case where the husband wanted to cut the life support, and the family was like, no, and it went to court. That's exactly what happens here. So when we go through the interview, in the interview there are questions that dictate how you want all of that to play out. Should you be in a coma and can't respond, or even what do you want to happen to your body? Do you want to be an organ donor? Now,
so what I'm hearing, and the Schiavo case is a really good example of that. So what I'm hearing, had there been an advanced healthcare directive, rather than those two parties having to go to court to settle it, Schiavo herself could have settled it while she was alive and well.
That's right. And in our case, we actually have a video of that. So if somebody wanted to challenge that, you have the video of that person saying, this is what I want to happen. And then, of course, the document, the video means nothing. The document is everything. But the video just gives you that ability to go, wait a minute, that is what she said she wanted. And you just kind of, put them together and go through that. So it's really important.
And again, in the advanced healthcare directive, the way I understand it, it basically has two functions. Number one, it sets up the directive, as you said, the man who said 90 days and no more. So it sets up the type of care that you're asking for, but it also sets up a person who has to make the choices when the choices need to be made. So it does both of those things.
Exactly. It does that, and it really kind of anticipates worst case scenario so that people are prepared for that. And to be able to carry that, even to look at the document on your phone, this is the kind of stuff that we can do now. It's like, this will be available in a little device that's 5 inches long that you can pull up while you're in the hospital or wherever you are. But I also want to talk about somebody being an organ donor. Now, I'm not against medicine. I witness exactly what happens in hospitals, and I understand the grand, like, the way that it works. Some people are concerned about being donors because they might think if their situation worsens, then their organs aren't going to be functional for them to do that. So maybe the hospital or the doctors or whoever may accelerate their condition. Now remember,
Right,
like remember the person I told you that wanted 90 days? Well,
right,
in that case, they would have to do everything, even though the intentions for the person he wants to live, but after 90 days, he says, no, there's nothing else that can be done for them. For those 90 days, he doesn't want anybody to accelerate his condition and
right,
die
right.
because maybe he's an organ donor and those organs aren't going to be well after 90 days, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. So healthcare directives are a focal point of your whole legacy planning because, again, the person who's setting up the legacy can dictate not only how they want their care to be, not only how they want any organ donating to be handled, they can also name the person who, in lieu of them being able to respond, can actually make those decisions on the spot.
Absolutely. And what we do is we want to be able to give the person that gets assigned the advanced health directive, for them to have knowledge of it.
Right.
One of the aspects about this is, again, nothing wrong with attorneys, but I'll get into about the funding part. Some attorneys do not let the people that are named inside the trust what their responsibilities are. What
Right.
we do is we meet with the extended family and say, look, Johnny picked you to be the financial, right? The financial power of attorney, the advanced health directive, and in succession, because we want there to be some knowledge of it. So they're not surprised and we know who to reach out to in case something happens. So the family knows who to reach out to in case something happens to them.
Yeah. And I'm sure, and I think you've referred to it, you are actually letting that person know who you're picking to be the person who handles the directive, the ability to say, no, I don't want it,
Of course.
which
Yeah.
which they have the right to do also.
They do. And that kind of brings us to that point about the last will and testament, is that the will is important because it tells the wishes. The only issue is it's contestable in court. So it
Right.
has to go through probate. When it goes through probate, that person's all their finances and all their affairs are are open to the public. So when and by the way, probate is very expensive and very lengthy. It could take several years to settle, versus in this case, we talk about having, a trust document, whether it's, revocable trust. When there's three major things that we want to look at: somebody who is a homeowner, somebody has young children, or children with disabilities. And then the third one is someone who has a business, because there has to be some kind of succession. So
Right.
those are the areas that we focus on to make sure that your wishes get carried on.
Yeah. Which then, of course, brings us right smack dab to the will and the importance of making sure you put whatever in the will that you want, and the people that would be the beneficiaries of that will are very plain and clear and exactly, again, what your wishes are.
Right. Yeah, and so initially we'll go ahead and take a look at what's actually going on, like what's in place. Maybe somebody might have done something years ago. They may have done a will that's probably 10, 20 years old. Well, obviously something has changed. Somebody moved out of state, somebody bought a different house, sold the house, got married, got remarried. I mean, there's so many things that take place. And in this situation here, we want to identify what they actually have in place. For the reason is that they need to be able to take control. That's what it's all about. As the trustee of your trust, you have the power to administer your legacy plan. If and when you can't make those decisions, your plan kicks into action to complete all of your specified wishes, right? Those decisions are made from the person that's designated in line.
Very good.
Yeah, and
So,
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, just, letter of intent.
Right. So what the differentiation here is, as opposed to you going to any kind of a attorney, estate planning attorney, and you might be confused about the language and all of that. Now we want to specify these things. The letter of intent, which I'm going to go over, the ultimate beneficiaries, and then the age based and distributions based on performance. Like if somebody has any issues with drugs and alcohol and things like that. But let's talk about the letter of intent. So this one is, when we talk about protecting your home. So now, Mike, look, I hear that every single day, more than 12 to 15,000 people turn 65. I think there were 82 million baby boomers. As people begin to age, there's something that's going on that maybe is changing, the landscape is changing a little bit. It's called aging in place.
Right.
Usually people before, when they got to a certain age, they will put them in a rehab home, or they call them, I don't like that term, but people call it old folks home. You know what I mean?
Right.
But here's the difference, is that we know that people love their family and their loved ones, and they would rather be in the comfort and the care of their loved ones. So I want to play a scenario here. Somebody goes, has an illness, and they're 75 years old. Without this letter of intent, their house is not protected. This actually says the letter of intent to return to, to return back to the home. It is my intent to reside in my home throughout the remainder of my life, regardless of my physical or mental health. And should I be confined to a nursing home or a rehab facility, I still intend to return to my home. Now, the question is, why do you think that specifically is written in this trust document?
Well, that's the wish of the person who owns the home.
And because if they didn't, do you think maybe the courts could make a decision to sell their home and pay for all these, high hospital bills? And they're going to take a look at those assets. Protecting their home is, with this document alone, they'll be able to protect that, and they have this letter of intent. But without it, anything can happen. So now
Okay.
we talk about, asset protection, right? Think about how asset protection, and that, because that has a lot of different variables, right? But
Right.
here, this document alone is able to protect an asset like a home, but of other, asset protection elements. What can you think of?
Well, again, asset protection could be a number of different things. It could be where the money's invested. It could be what is your intent for any particular asset. And by letting your desires known and to put them into a written document makes it a whole lot easier for the family, first of all, to know your wishes and administrate them, and for a court to carry them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I I talk about, not only is it you and yourself, your spouse, but then it's your children. And creating trust fund babies is actually kind of fun. I think the best example I had of that was when I was working at one of the large banks. There was a guy that used to sit in front of me, and he could just, I mean, he would talk back to every boss. He would come in, and he would come and go whenever he wanted to. And one day in particular, he went to lunch, and then he came back from an Acura dealer, and he started showing everybody, I just went and bought this car. I'm like, what? Like, how do you go and buy a car during your lunch hour? And then he told
Right.
everybody, he's like, look, he's like, I'm a trust fund baby. He's like, I only work here because one of the stipulations, in order for me to keep that trust going and keep that money coming, I have to hold a full-time job. But this guy, he challenged everybody. I mean, if anybody ever came up to him and said, "Hey, listen, you need," he's like, "No, I'm not doing that." And
Right.
so Now, what I want to talk about is having responsible heirs. Now, in this situation, and you know the laws of age of majority in almost every state. I think there's only one state that the age of majority is less than 18, but almost every one of them, if a child has a life insurance policy, or I'm sorry, if a family has a life insurance policy for the benefit of the child,
Right,
maybe a 401k, some kind of asset, at the age of 18, they could have access to that. That's the law.
right, right,
Now, how are you going to protect that, right? Like,
right.
how does a responsible um, husband, wife, father, mother take care of that? Well, here's an example of, as we go through the interview, we will ask the parents, do you hold any assets in a trust for beneficiaries beyond the age of 18? And so the answer is yes or no. We go in and take these age-based distributions, because I don't think there's anything more damaging to a young mind than money, right?
Yes.
You imagine, Mike, having somebody that becomes 18 years old and they get 25% of a $2 million life insurance policy? What do you think is going to
Right,
happen?
exactly. Yeah,
Huh?
yeah,
The new Corvette, whatever, the muscle car, and it'll just ruin them. So here's an opportunity for the family to then take another control of this and make sure that their child or their children are going to always be able to do things the way that they designed them to do. There's never going to be a lack. There will be a guardian that will be able to provide for them. But in this case here, you can select any ages and percentages listed, modify them as you want to. Maybe that your child is maybe one child is very responsible. That the other one isn't. Maybe you begin their distributions later in life, right? Now, what one of the things about this is, like, I don't know that there's many attorneys that actually go through this and put those stipulations in there, and you now have the ability to design these trust documents based on everybody's wishes.
right.
Pretty cool.
Again, it's the ability for the creator of the legacy to extend their knowledge and their, what they want to see happen even beyond their own grave.
That's right. And you did think about everything. Now, I also talk about this in the letter of direction. So you have a letter of intent. Here, you also have a letter of direction, where you can stipulate and really carry out your values, your views, your virtues, anything that you want your family to carry out. So look, in the beginning, there's going to be these conditions on distributions. In addition to holding assets in a trust based on age, you can also retain assets in the trust until certain behavioral conditions are met. So here's where you can say, look, if my child has a drug problem, an alcohol problem, or a gambling problem, I'm going to hold the funds for them until 1, 3, or 5 years until they're clean. Now, I think that is one of the most responsible things that we can do for our children. We don't want this to ruin them. We want them to perpetuate our values, our beliefs, the things that we hold on to, right?
Yeah.
Now, that has drugs and alcohol, but you know what? In your letter of direction, you can also just say, you know what? I would love for my son or daughter to understand money and business. And really, it's what you end up doing with some of that money is reinvesting it, and living off of the interest, instead of taking the $1 million or the $2 million and doing whatever. Showing them exactly how to use the money and run a business, maybe. But also, in this letter of direction, you can stipulate what it means to you for your faith and your family, and how you want these responsible heirs to make sure that they carry those virtues on later in life.
Yeah, and by having these things available, you're not disenfranchising anybody, because hopefully whatever the deficiency is a temporary thing. So by saying 1, 3, 5 years or whatever, you can still have that legacy left to that person after they get through whatever problem they're going through, rather than feeding it.
Exactly. So, it really comes down to the impact that we're going to have. And I always like to say that it does matter in eternity. This came to me as I was working through this, and I decided to write it down because I think we all have to have some kind of statement that allows us to settle in our minds that this is important. And I'll read it to you. It says, "The world will know what I believe, what I work so hard for, and about those I love the most in my own words and emotions," right through the video. "My intentions and my voice will continue to be shared, and my loved ones will have less questions about who I am, my existence, and my purpose in life. So help me God." Now,
Right.
this was given to me. I think I believe in divine, impact, and this I wrote it down as we were going through this, and I decided that it is something that I want everyone to consider because it really touches on the things that are most important is our legacy as it continues and the impact that it's having for them.
Right.
And then aside from that, I think the video, what it does is it lets you carry on that legacy. Like I think of, right now I have 3 children left. We had 4, we have 3 children left.
Right.
We have 2 grandchildren. Now, they love their grandpa, right? I'm a grandpa. But at some point, look, we all know the aspects of life. If I'm not here, they have recordings of me, my YouTube channel. They have, a special message, recorded for them about how much I love them, about what I want them to do, what I envision that they'll become, responsible citizens of this nation, living out their faith, in God and loving their family. I mean, I don't know if anybody really, really gets down to that level. And I think it's so important because it really leaves less questions for them later on in life, as they're able to watch that video.
If you don't mind, I think you've heard this story, and I think it's appropriate just to retell it. Very close friend of mine who's an agent with Prudential, one of the top agents with Prudential for over 25 years. And he called me up one day about a case that he had just finished. He had written a policy on a husband and wife. They were young entrepreneurs and unfortunately killed in a car accident at a very young age. And they left one child. And over the years, the agent, his name was George, was always referred to as Uncle George by the young child growing up. And in the will and the trust agreement, there was a statement that when he was getting ready to go to college at age 18, he could buy a reasonable transportation. So he's approaching age 18. He calls up George. He says, "Uncle George," he says, "I'm going to buy that car that mom and dad wanted me to have so I go to school. And I just want to let you know, I just saw this red Triumph. It's just a knockout." And George says, well, Joe, look, I don't know if that's what your mom was referring to and your dad, but there was a letter. This is again back in the day before the video. There's a letter that you need to read, and we can discuss it. And Joe says, "Yeah, okay, sure, Uncle George," and hung up. About 2.5, 3 weeks later, Joe calls Uncle George back and he says, "Uncle George, when you get a chance, I'd like you to stop over and see the new. Well, it's not really new; it's a used Nova, but it's really a nice car. I'd like you to see it." And George was stopped for a brief moment, and he says, "Joe," he says, "what happened to the Triumph?" Well, Uncle George, I went back and I read the letter that Dad left me, and he explained why he wanted me to have reasonable transportation, and that you know he would look for something that was a moderately priced used car that I could use while I was in college, and then get whatever I want at a later date. Well, that was the power of what that insurance agent did for that family, which led this child to make a correct decision based on what his parents wanted for him. And I see your asset legacy and the video and all the documentation doing exactly the same type of thing. This is powerful. This gives family an extension to any one individual life.
Yeah, it does a lot. The video allows people to really understand. There's a concept. I was speaking to an author at a conference last year, and she introduced me to something that I didn't know about. It was called inheritance theft. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like how does that happen, right? So it allows all the wishes to go exactly the way the person intended to. And then, but think about the family. You want your family to continue. So we go through different aspects of a health agent, and then for the individuals that are maybe life insurance agents, financial advisors, there's an aspect of this as a financial agent. Not that you're going to run their money, but remember they want some feedback, and so you're able to then imagine somebody had a business, for you to be able to then come in, because we'll have a business executor, like what would happen to that business? Do they want to sell it? Do they want to keep it going? Do they want to increase like how does this work out? There's a analyzer, there's a way to bring that about. Dealing with a business broker, how do you deal with that? Giving the financial powers of attorney for the business, if there's a family business involved. All of those things, if you think about what we talked about in the beginning, if you want to protect your home, if you want to protect your children, if you want to protect your business, and if you want to protect your health, these are the conversations that we need to be having. And I probably, to kind of close this out, this is the vision here with your family legacy plan. Our vision is to empower all individuals to document, tell, and formalize their intentions for their loved ones so they can leave an everlasting, impactful story. That's the bottom line, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, Mike. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that this is an easy way for people to keep in touch with us. This is a way that they can scan. Of course, we'll put the link in the description too. But if they want to just schedule a 5 to 10 minute phone call just to find out how things are going and what can be done. There's also some material that we put out on YouTube. It's called Matters of Eternity, where I document the story about how our family is overcoming the loss of our 25-year-old daughter, and all the emotional and mental aspects of losing a loved one and going through hospital trauma. But more importantly, on the other end, is how to solve for these financial situations as people go through it. And of course, the story is there with a lot of other principles. Excuse me. And then there are some people that really, really, really like a lot of information. They maybe have an engineer mind. They want to know exactly how something works. I know that I pick up my iPhone and I want to know, can it take me to where I want to go on my GPS? Can it text the person or call the person? That's all I want to know. But some engineers want to go deep into it. I created a course where we go deeper into it. It's about 30 hours of instruction about how this actually works, because some people want more information. And so,
Yeah.
I do appreciate you taking this on and going through it. This is very dear to my heart because my daughter wanted this, and we started this together. We have started a nonprofit in her name to help the ASL community, the deaf and hard of hearing. And
Right.
what that's going to do is I'm telling her story. The more I tell her story, the more I heal. The more I keep her name alive, the more it makes me feel like this is the impact that I'm living, and the
Right.
more I prepare people for, unfortunately, the worst case scenarios. So I want to thank you for doing this, Mike.
Well, Mynor, I want to thank you also. From the time you told me about asset, planning and asset legacy, I was very impressed. I'm so pleased that you shared it with us, and also with our whole new venture with the AIS idea. This certainly is a key part of what we're talking about, because all the planning in the world isn't going to help what we really want to do unless the people do the documentation to make it work. So, Mynor, thank you. Thank you for your explanation, and thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. All right.